Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, book one for the massively popular, massive in general, I don't even have to tell you guys, Wheel of Time book series. You know it, you love it. If you don't know it, you probably will love it if you love fantasy books. What's up, guys? It's the Chronicler bringing to you a book review for something that is honestly very near and dear to my reader's heart, because this was the book that got me back into reading. And I'll get into it a little bit more in the review, but this is an insanely important book to me, guys. Not that you would know, but I was not reading for the last several years. And it just so happened, last year at work, of all places, I was talking to a guy that was just an avid reader, super into reading, and loved fantasy books. And I would talk to him about the fact that, I hadn't read in a long time, and that when I did read, it was all Stephen King or Dean Koontz or mystery books, or, just thought of books that I had read whenever I was a kid, and really wanted to kind of get back into reading. And he just kind of mentioned to me nonchalantly, he said, well, if you like fantasy, why don't you try The Wheel of Time? And I had heard of The Wheel of Time before, but to me, fantasy books stopped at Lord of the Rings, it stopped at Game of Thrones, and that was it. There was nothing that could top that, and fantasy was kind of a, please forgive me everybody, a silly genre, I thought at the time. But to kind of humor him, I decided, okay, you know what? I want to get back into reading. I'll pick up The Wheel of Time. Who knows? Maybe I'll really like it. Long story short, and a insanely lucky Facebook marketplace pickup about a week or two later, I grabbed the entire Wheel of Time series. I'm not even kidding. I grabbed the whole series for $30 off Facebook Marketplace. I know, it was an insanely lucky purchase on my part. Not all of them are first editions, but some of them are. Not to rub it in, guys, but yeah, very happy with this, to say the least. But anyways, I went into the series with an open mind. I had no idea what to expect, and I cracked open the Eye of the World with no preconceived notions at all, and just went for the story. And what I found was something that would end up rekindling a forgotten passion of mine, and that is reading. So without any further ado, guys, I apologize for the long setup, but now for the review. The Eye of the World, book number one by Robert Jordan, begins with a pretty endearing father and son interaction between the main character, Rand al'Thor, and his father, Tam al'Thor, as they travel to their local town of Edmondsfield. On the road there, Rand notices something isn't quite right. A mysterious shape seems to be stalking him and his father, and this obviously foreshadows a lot to come. The mystery sets up the tone of the book well, and we get some bits of friendly townsfolk interaction that set up the likable, for the most part, endearing world that Rand and his friends and his family inhabit. You really get that good small town, everyone knows everyone sense about Edmondsfield, and I think that Robert Jordan does a really fine job of making you care about what will happen to these people over the course of 14, 15 books. Now, I know, guys, that the characters in Wheel of Time end up being a pretty big point of contention amongst some of the fans, but in my opinion, no one overstays their welcome in the Eye of the World, which is great and very tough to pull off, because the cast in this book is pretty vast. The book is not insanely huge, but it does span multiple towns, kingdoms, and cities and scenarios, and each place that you visit in the book feels unique. One really interesting thing about the Wheel of Time, maybe the most interesting thing, is how well the map and the world became ingrained in my imagination after a while. Literally, as the characters are making their way through, I'm remembering and picturing every little detail about this world, and literally felt myself mapping it out as I read. And the coolest thing about the map and the world was, as I started to get into book 2 and book 3 and so forth, whenever we got to revisit some of these locations from the Eye of the World, I became strangely nostalgic for these places, even though they only exist in this book and in my mind. It felt good to go back and revisit some of these places and some of these characters, which is such a cool, almost like RPG video game feeling that you wouldn't think a book would give you, but this really did. But at times you'll feel mentally exhausted from the journey and how far the characters go. Not that the book is a walking simulator, but there is a lot of miles traveled, but you enjoy it, and it makes for a very intriguing story. Next, I wanted to hit a couple basic but important points about the book. The Eye of the World's biggest strength, in my opinion, guys, as I've already mentioned, is the world itself and the dynamic of the group that you follow, the main characters. They're all different in their own unique way. They all have their faults, they all have their strengths, and they play off each other well. There's just so much here, guys, to enjoy and latch onto, and believe me, we're just scratching the surface with this series. Now, to get a couple obvious points out of the way, too, there's plenty of action in the book. Battles in all shapes and sizes happen that surprise and delight. Yeah, the magic system is very cool. Not only that, but the different types of magic creates such a cool distinction between some of the characters. Some characters have different magical abilities than others. I don't think that's a really big spoiler. I don't really consider that to be a big spoiler because this is a non-spoiler review. But yeah, just a small detail. One other minor thing is since we're talking about powers, Perrin's powers are my favorite in the book. The Eye of the World may be the beginning of an epic series, but I also feel that it does a really good job of feeling like its own complete story. And to kind of go ahead and summarize the good, there are plenty of epic moments, like I mentioned. There's scenes that make you gasp in delight and in shock. And I think that Robert Jordan's way of making the reader visualize his world is impeccable. I think that this is kind of a good and a bad thing, as some readers have said that he sort of takes a little bit too long to describe things, which I do agree with. So I think it can be a positive and a negative. But it's truly impressive, honestly, as a reader, how well Robert Jordan knows his own world. There really is hardly anything like it in fantasy or in any other genre. So there's a bunch of good about the book. What about the not so good? I kind of find Robert Jordan's writing style to be a little over the top at times. Like I just mentioned, he'll take several sentences or even a whole paragraph to describe clothing or what a character is wearing or a piece of jewelry. Another nitpick of mine is I really wish that we encountered more creatures in the world. Obviously, in the book, we meet Loyal, who is a human companion creature that is more beast than human. He's fantastic. I love Loyal. I just wish that we got more creatures or humanoid characters like that. And the enemies in the book are also very monster-like, and there are some cool designs and creatures there. But I do wish this fantasy world had a bit more to offer in terms of fantastical creatures. At least in book one. Speaking of cities, I kind of found the constant: arrive at a new city, stay at an inn, leave that city, arrive at the next city, stay at another inn, to get pretty repetitive after a while, and the formula kind of got a little stale for me toward the end of the book. But like I mentioned, guys, this is book one, and obviously there are many pages to come and many more lands to cross. There's also the low-hanging fruit that I will not go for, which you probably hear around many booktubers and many Reddit sites that, oh, there's so many Lord of the Rings similarities. That always gets brought up, but I'll be one of the few booktubers who aren't going to dock it for this. Everything is derivative in some way, and I don't feel Eye of the World deserves that. But all in all, I think this is a very, very good fantasy romp, guys. It served as my christening into reading this genre, and I'm forever grateful to it and this series. It's not without its faults, but the Eye of the World is great. I think it often gets lost in the bigger Wheel of Time picture, but its value can't be understated. It's not my favorite of the series so far, more into that later, but I do have to give it props for setting the stage for what's to come in a very entertaining and complete way. Most importantly, this book has my thanks for getting me to love reading again. So yeah, I give it an A. I think you guys should just go out and get this book and read it. Or, hey, take this copy. I don't care. I'm done with it. Here, take it. Take it.